Hi everyone, this is Mateo Vigo from TOC Worldwide, and we are here at TOC Asia, and I am joined by Amita Maheshwari, Global Head of Supply Chain Development at AP MOLLER MAERSK. Hi Amita, how are you?
Very good, how are you?
I'm great, and I was so excited by the session that just finished and where you were discussing about supply chain resilience and many other topics, and I was really interested, and I wanted to ask you maybe a few more questions. Just to deep dive into that. So yeah, during the panel, you talked a lot about diversification, and clearly it's something that has been talked a lot about in recent times. Given the uncertainty that we've experienced as an industry over past months, let's say, do you have any word of advice for BCOs and shippers that might want to navigate this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matteo. So, and as you said, we had a really good talk at the panel about it. I think the question about whether to diversify or not, it really is rooted in what's the business priority for each company, right? So the whole trend of diversification has been quite active and ongoing for the last few years. It started with the need to diversify risks related to sourcing. And I think in today's world, it's to diversify risks coming from geopolitical sort of scenarios, right? I think the advice that I would say, would kind of say or share is companies need to understand the immediate and the long-term impact of the decision to diversify. Okay. You talk about kind of moving the sourcing or manufacturing, comes with a lot of other factors to consider, right? The availability of labor, talent, technology, and the capital that is required to basically put new plants, if you talk about diversifying manufacturing. But also if you want to talk about diversify sourcing, then it comes with, what are the associated risks when companies are making new supplier relationships, right? So the cost-benefit analysis really makes a difference. And I think that's where each company has to basically have a cross-functional dialogue to understand what's the growth plan for the business, what are the markets that companies want to get into, get out of, and then related to that, what really needs to keep going, and then basically diversify accordingly.
Yeah, and based on that, they make the decisions. And so yeah, definitely there is always, a risk analysis and an assessment to be made. Then another element that was also discussed during the panel was, the role of the governments in this. Without naming any specific governments, I think there is always room for, collaboration in a certain way. So I would want to ask, how can governments work better with you guys to make it a more, a friendlier and more attractive environment for operating in the world of supply chain?
Yeah, that's, in fact, I think we are lucky to be in part of a world where there's a lot of good and positive momentum on that front, right? Okay. So with most of the economies kind of seeing exponential growth or stuff that's not happened before, governments do have a crucial role to play, and they are doing so, right? Right from basically simplifying the processes of getting the right investments and allowing the entry of foreign players into markets, stepping up to also understand how the infrastructure needs to kind of be ramped up, what's the public-private partnership that is required to do so. And then also we've seen now the governments, they have their officials really spending time with corporates to also understand what matters to them, what brings success and what creates value for the end customer, right? Or basically for the people of that country. So as I think these are important and ongoing factors, there can be no success without a participative, supportive, and forward-looking government. And I guess, that's all I want to say.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. There is working in tandem is really important. And I think the last topic that really stayed with me from the conversation was the element of sustainability. I think it's 2025. We all want to be sustainable, but there is always this sort of like question about, is there an upfront cost? How do we manage that? You know, how do you think we can achieve supply chains that are both sustainable but also efficient? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think we could argue that's true for any good and pivotal innovation, right? So most of the technologies, when they kind of came alive, they were not necessarily available to everybody, right? They were not necessarily cheap, but with time, we find a way to basically take care of the cost element, right? When the volumes build up, that's when things the cost comes down, right? Exactly. I think it's the same equation over here. It is a difficult trade-off. There's no doubt about that. And we fundamentally believe that it is a collaborative game, right? For us as an industry to really further this agenda, all players have to come together. Voices have to be singular in understanding what it takes to basically make a significant shift, and then also how to break that down into smaller steps, right? And I think the way to think about this is, today some decisions are being made in our businesses. Take setting up a warehouse as an example, right? And those decisions are going to stay with us, stay with the companies or the industry for a long time. You know, an asset that is built today is going to operate for the next 10, 12 years, right? So at least in our company, when we build new assets or make these investments, we of course, prioritize the processes and the technology or recycling and reuse of material to basically have sustainable operations, right? And I guess that's essentially how we need to start looking at this. So it's not just a short-term trade-off; it's a long-term decision, and it needs to be backed by the voice of the leaders, right? So it has to be a company level or board level priority. If you have to be successful in this. Of
course, with the long-term thinking and part of the strategy. So, I think that really makes sense. I think some of the key takeaways the key elements that I'm taking with me here is there's definitely the need for communication, collaboration, and long-term thinking. Amita, I would love to keep asking you questions, but we cannot make this video any longer. But if you enjoyed this, do make sure to join us at our next TOC event. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Amita.
Thank you very much.